هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله.
Assalamu alaikum everybody, so happy Ramadan, and in today's video I'm gonna talk about something I haven't really talked about on this channel, and that's my journey to Islam. I mean, you guys know I've been making content for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, and it's all about Islam, but I never kind of had a chance to just sit down and talk about my experience. And the only thing I'm doing, the only reason, subhanAllah, the only reason I'm doing this is because there's many convert stories on YouTube, and people love to watch them because I used to watch a lot of them when I was embracing Islam. But I'm doing it because I remember some of those stories stuck with me, and they were actually a stepping stone in my journey of accepting Islam. So inshallah, if my story can be like somewhat helpful for someone who's currently looking into Islam and they see all these barriers of entry, that's the person I'm doing it for. So maybe many of you guys will already know this, but let's just do this unfiltered, unedited, probably no cutting, nothing. It's gonna be a bit longer video, but let me start from the beginning. So how did I become a Muslim? Basically, I'm currently 30. I'm gonna be 32. So I live in Slovakia. Slovakia is a country in Central Europe. It's a very small country of about 5 million people. Mostly Catholic, I would say about 70% Catholic, 20% Orthodox or Greek Orthodox, and then you have atheists. But yeah, that's kind of the background. So Slovakia is kind of Eastern European country. It's not really I wouldn't say it's part of the West. Nowadays it is, but it wasn't when I was born. It was part of the Czechoslovakia. It was freshly after the revolution. And I was brought up, just to make my life story shorter, to get to the point, I was brought up as a Christian, as everybody is. So you learn about the Bible and stuff. But it was never kind of interesting to me. But, you go to the church, and I was actually pretty involved. So I was baptized. I did all the things like the anointment. I don't know what the names are in English for these celebrations, but basically you have a celebration at the age of like 7 or 8, and then you have one at the age of 14, 15. But I want to talk about my relationship with God, because that's what this is about. So when I was a child, I definitely felt some connection, and I used to pray a lot. We used to have these prayers. My grandma would teach me. And it would be very nice. And I used to go to church. I never it felt very rigid to me, the whole ceremony of a Catholic church. But it was just part of my identity. I couldn't even imagine that some people have something else going on. Like when I talked to some of my friends and they said, we don't really go to church. I was like, what? How is that even possible? So I couldn't even fathom the idea of not having a church or something like that in your life, because it was such an instrumental part of my growing up. Really, I mean, everything was about it, and I was involved in the church. I was helping the priest at some point for about a couple of months. I was maybe 10 or something. So I was one of the altar boys, and my grandfather was so proud. He was like crying, like, "Oh, that's my grandson helping the priest," and doing all that stuff. So I did that, and basically that's most kind of Slovak youth is brought up in this kind of environment. Maybe not nowadays, but 20 years ago, definitely 30 years ago. And then basically everything started to break at the age of 13, 14, when I was introduced to, you grow up, you start looking at some vices, you start experimenting with alcohol, drugs, women, girls at that time. And so that was like, I definitely had a fair moment of those experiences, and they led me far astray. And basically, even logically to me, I wasn't even convinced of the idea of God at the age of 15 or 16. But there was something in me still, because I remember during that ceremony when the priest was asking me if I have some sins, because I can't accept this thing if I have some sins. I was like really thinking about it, so I actually believed in it. I remember that was the last time I remember having God consciousness, or taqwa in Islam, and then it completely left, because you getting introduced to different ways of thinking. Mostly, at that age I was introduced to conspiracy theories. I would watch a lot of zeitgeist movies and Alex Jones type of things. And I would be like, man, everything is a fake, everything's conspiracy, like all the mainstream media are lying, and everything is like, there's this like secret club running the world. So everybody was on that. And then there was a lot of documentaries against Christianity, and they talked about how Jesus wasn't born on the 25th December, how all the saints and holidays is made up. And that was true, actually. So there wasn't like you could argue those things. And so I was like, subhanAllah. So I got scammed. And then, so it took some time, but I basically completely left the church. And I think by the age of 17, 18, I became I was kind of agnostic, I remember. But I became completely atheist. And basically, it wasn't even on my mind, the religion or God or anything. I just thought like, okay, all the religions are false. All the, Christianity definitely has a problem. So my family is just stupid enough to believe in it, but I'm out, and I'm going to actually actively go against the religion. Any organized religion is a problem. Any culture, any traditional way of life is an issue, and we should just get rid of it and embrace this new age that we have of progressing. And so that was my mindset. So I completely abandoned everything, and I was laughing at our traditions, how backwards we are. Not just the religious, but we have some national things we do which are kind of not kosher, let's say. And then, so I was like hardcore atheist, and I started reading Adam Smith. Free market economy, became a hardcore capitalist, in the sense where I would just say we should just dissolve the nation state. There shouldn't be any nation state. We should just have one global government, and there shouldn't even be a global government. We should have a complete anarchy and just let the free market rule, in terms of like any regulations, any state or social system, welfare state should be dissolved, and there should be only pure capitalism, free market economy. That was the Adam Smith idea. Then I read some Marx and other guys, and I couldn't like figure out, these guys had some mistakes, but I thought like definitely free market is the future, and like the only way you're gonna live a good life is by being an entrepreneur. But I didn't think it through. I didn't think about death. I didn't think about purpose of life. I was just concerned with the material world, and in that sense, I viewed the American system as the best, because I also moved to the US, and so I experienced it. And then I experienced the downside of it as well. But definitely it was part of it's part of the learning journey, right? So I didn't have any connection to God. At this moment, I'm completely turned off. There's no Wi-Fi receipts, receiving signal, nothing. It's like your Wi-Fi isn't working, you're not connected. You're just worried about the material world. And if you have that mindset, you will eventually just be worried about progress and constant scientific progress, and just getting rid of all the cultures and traditions. We don't have to go too much in that, but so if you have that mindset, it sometimes can be very dark, because in the beginning it sounds very cool and trendy and nice. Especially I would listen to a ton of Sam Harris, a ton of atheists mocking, of course, Islam, but all the religions were the same to me. And making jokes, comedians, stand-up comedy. My dream was to be a stand-up comic as well, kind of like a Louis C.K. type of thing. All this nonsense, you know, you always come up with the idea of like, oh, what's my purpose? Well, I'm gonna start a company, I'm gonna be a startup CEO, and then it changes, you know. So it's always this kind of catching and chasing some feeling, getting it and realizing it's empty and it's again, and you set these artificial goals in your life to progress, but where are you progressing? To your grave at the end of the day. So that really dawned on me after some years. I was like, well, I'm gonna die, and the thought of death was really lurking in my mind since the young age, because I had a huge car accident at the age of 4 that I survived, but it was like a miracle. I was like in a hospital for a month, and I was really like, I had some spiritual connections at that moment. I remember it right now, even when the accident from when I was 4. But I just rationalized it like, yeah, I had some like chemicals released in my brain, so that's probably that. I don't need to worry about it. Like, that's such a hardcore materialist mindset that everything you feel, you kind of just say, oh, well, it's just some molecules. But that mindset is dumb, because you can just say, hey, my love for my child, this is just some molecules. Like, I don't really have to worry about that. You know, so if you really take it to the extreme, it can like lead to human extinction. Because there is no human soul. There's nothing inside of you that actually is like important or life-giving. There's no soul. You are just a clunk of atoms, molecules, whatever. So that was my mindset. And I struggled with it a lot, because that worldview doesn't provide any meaning for you. And you're told constantly, there's no meaning, don't look for it, it's cool. You can just live your life, man. So you live your life, you become addicted to drugs, as I was, or alcohol, or you do some weird sexual experience, which can lead to damaging effects on your psychology and your future sex life. So I tried many things, man, and it wasn't bringing me anywhere. It was actually, I had this deep feeling afterwards, any of these things, like, man, something's wrong, something's off, I'm doing something really bad. But since there's no bad or good, there's no morality, you can just do whatever you want, unless you harm other people. Liberal principle of harm, John Locke. Then, yeah, that would be like, I would just rationalize it again, like, well, just ignore that feeling, you know. But you know what I'm talking about. Those feelings come up. And they kind of create this long-term depression type of thing in your mind. And overall, especially when I graduated and I started working full-time, it really dawned on me, like, the reality of this world is so dark. You know, you have to work, pay taxes. Because when you're in university, you may have some time to think, but when you start working, the reality of this world starts crumbling, and it starts like pushing you. Because you have to choose your career, you have to choose your family, you have to make these choices. And so I would work, and I would become semi-depressed, because I was thinking, like, I'm not utilizing my potential. But everybody thinks this actually at that time, because you don't have any potential. You haven't proven anything to the market yet, or to the world. So you have to start as a garbage man, or as a nothing, cold calling people, you know. You have to start at the bottom. So I would do that. And yeah, it would make me depressed. And then I would have a very dark 9-month period. And I was like 20 something when I would have these headaches. This was like such a darkness, I can't even explain it, to be honest. As Al-Ghazali says, it's something you have to experience, very difficult to explain, but imagine, hard to put into words. Al-Ghazali would call me stupid, but I'll try. Imagine just waking up, the first thing you notice is a pain in your head, and it doesn't go away. It's not like a pain where sometimes your head hurts or something, or you have a hangover. No, it's like constant pain nagging you in the brain. It doesn't go away, and it creates this secondary effects where anytime I would hear a music or sound, my head would wanna blow. I was unable to eat. unable to sleep. The only thing really that kept me alive was my girlfriend, which is now my wife, alhamdulillah. But she was the one who actually kept me just alive in that time, because it was so dark. I didn't even want to get out of bed. And yeah, I would faint at the workplace. I would go for a CT scan, so it would take me to the hospital. And they would put, it's called iodium, I don't know, in your blood. And they would like scan my brain to see if something's wrong. And they would say, no, you're completely okay. And then the doctor would say, yeah, you're fine. But then the doctor would say, yeah, there's this disease that comes to young people when they start becoming professionals. I'm like, what? This disease is called, I forgot the name because it's been a couple of years, but there's a special name for this disease. It's uncurable. You'll have it forever, and you just have to kind of meditate, or like, you have to basically just live with it. just eat magnesium, go to nature. I'm like, what is this? And so when I learned this, I was like, man, if I have to live like this for the rest of my life, I'm going to kill myself, because it's unbearable. It's just the darkness of your thoughts. There was no happy thought. There was nothing. And I would just keep drinking alcohol, and it would be just a spiral of depression. I can't, hard to explain, you know. So very dark stuff. And I would actually read a couple of books in that time, I remember. And I had Dostoevsky, if you know something about the guy, he wrote many bad books. And I would read Raskolnikov, which is this guy who's going through depression, as I was at the time, and he kills his neighbor, and he doesn't regret it for a rent. And then he goes on this like journey of like his soul, he shivers like he just killed someone, and then he realized that he's a murderer. And I completely like, I resonated with that, because I just was realizing, man, I'm dying. Like right now I'm dying. If I don't solve this issue, I'm gonna be dead soon. I don't know how, but it's gonna happen, because it's impossible to live like this. And it would go for 9 months. So I would not wish those feelings on my worst enemy. Alhamdulillah, it's still incredible for me, not just being a Muslim, but just think back to that time that I made it. Like, guys, when I tell you I was at the brink of collapse, I mean, I literally was on the brink of committing suicide. I was like, nobody could help me. My family couldn't help me. Doctor couldn't help me. I had no moral, nothing. So dark. That place was like darkness. But now, looking back at it from an Islamic point of view, alhamdulillah, this was Allah showing me. This was Allah actually. This was the only way He could show me the beauty of Islam, to go to that deep place, because otherwise I would never even looked into anything. Yeah, so that's very dark. But I had this thought of like, I have a fear. I had a fear. Usually you have some childhood trauma. Maybe somebody sexually abused you. Maybe you did something to someone. Maybe your father was abusive. I don't know. We all have something. And I had something on my own. I'm not going to tell you about it, but I have something. And I'm struggling with it to this day. But anyways, I had this thing that was also connected to my health. And I said like, man, this has been on the back of my mind for the past 15 years, and it's bubbling up. I can feel it bubbling up. When you grow up, those problems, you have those trauma, those childhood issues, you keep bearing them, but they come up when you're older, you know, so you have to deal with them. That's the only way to just kind of deal with that. And I would listen to Jordan Peterson a lot, because he also compared to just going face to face with your biggest fear and slaying the dragon. So that was my phase of JP, like 5 years ago, I don't know. And I would be like, man, what the hell, I'm still gonna die. So I rationalized it like, I'm gonna die either from this illness, and if this other thing is gonna kill me, let me just face it. So I remember going to a doctor's checkup, and this is crazy, and just shivering, because it's like you're going to a death sentence. I knew it's gonna be something bad. And subhanallah, when the procedure happened, they told me there's nothing wrong, it's fine. The amount of the stone, or what do you call the weight that was in my soul that got lifted, 15 years of like pressure, carrying this like something from my childhood, and it lifted. I could finally breathe. I was laughing, I was joyful, I was crying. I was like, this is the best moment of my life. And to this day, besides the Shahada, this is the best moment of my life, when I confronted my biggest fear. And from that moment I told myself, man, look, if you can confront the biggest fear, this fear that I had was bigger than going and fighting someone or starting a company or going to the moon. That's nothing compared to what I had to go through. So I said, if I can conquer this fear, I'm definitely able to conquer the fear of public speaking, the fear of starting my company, the fear of that. And so then, since then, it was like a roller coaster of things that happened. And so what happened next was I left my job, I started my company, and I also moved to Prague. I have, the pain went away. The pain went away from my head. So that was like, I couldn't believe it. I could finally see like life colors. It was incredible. I was still living a bad life in terms of drugs or alcohol, but finally I could see something happening. Something was happening in the zeitgeist in my head. Yeah, and so from that moment in time, I was kind of like, I had this sense of like, well, I'm not gonna be afraid anymore of anything. Like, if I'm gonna die, I already died. I already went to like something that could kill me. So why would I be afraid to die again if I'm still gonna die? And that has to do with death again. So even as a non-believer, I realized death is imminent. It's coming. And when I was faced with death, when I was like really looking at it, I was like, let's do it, man. If I die, hey, at least. But it took me 15 years to face death. So that experience, I don't know what it taught me. It was like, man, you're running in circles. You cannot escape this death thing. And then it would make me like semi-depressed in a different way, where I was like nihilistic. So I was like, what is the point of life then? If the death is imminent and I'm starting my business, I'm making money, I'm doing all this, I moved here and there, what's the point of all this? Because I was like really struggling and hustling. My company wasn't making any money. I was in debt. People were dragging me. One guy wanted to sue me. You know, you learn your entrepreneurship mistakes. Some invoices don't get paid, man. Hey, what you gonna do? All this. I'm like, subhanallah. I'm looking at my friends. Everybody's like successful, and I'm the only one going down. You know, and I thought like, is my life gonna be like shit? You know, am I gonna be like a loser? And I would just smoke a lot of weed and stuff as well. Anyways, this would go on for a couple of years. I would be then more successful, and then I joined the company. The company asked me to join their board and kind of like be part of a growth. It's a software company, so that was a huge also step up for me. But I also had my own company by that point. And that led me to Islam in a very strange way. So I would be looking up, you know, I'm on YouTube, and I would be documenting my YouTube kind of thing. So I would be already like, I always had this idea of sharing what I know with people. So my YouTube in the beginning was about kind of like motivation, but I've realized one thing. One guy said like the things you Google or look up more, that's the thing you're interested in. And I would look up a lot about death. And so I would make a video. It's still on my channel to this day. It's one of my oldest videos. How is Seneca the most death-accepting philosopher? I would have this, even as a child, I would have this idea to figure out death. And so I would read Seneca's books. I would read Marcus Aurelius, or like some of the ancient philosophers. It was very helpful. It was like this powerful quotes, Stoicism, right? But it still wasn't enough. It was like, man, they were fine with death, but I'm not. Like, I have to kind of go deeper than they. So what's next? What's after these philosophies you kind of looked at? What's the purpose? What is the point of life? Like really, let's get down to the business. And I realized I cannot be the only person on earth who's thinking this. It's impossible. There must have been someone who came to the same conclusion, like, okay, this is nice, but there has to be something else. And so I would then, since I'm on YouTube, I would get recommendations. And I remember, a couple of debates, but I remember mainly a couple of videos that made the biggest impact. And maybe Sajid is watching, so this is for you because you've commented on some of my videos. But he made a video about why is music haram. And I was Islam wasn't even on my radar. I did make a video against Islam in 2015 or something like this. It's no longer on my channel. But it wasn't from the point of view I wanted to learn anything. It was just like taking out the verses of violence and, doing some breakdown of them. So it was kind of like your typical low-level ex-Muslim stuff, but from a point of view of no one. So it was a really bad video, but that was my only exposure to Islam. And I traveled to Istanbul and some places and I seen the mosque, but I was definitely not even thinking. It's like, are you thinking of Buddhism? Are you thinking of Hinduism all day? No. It's like, yeah, I know about it, so what? Or are you thinking of Shintoism? No. It's like religion in Japan. So like that type of relationship. I know it exists, it's evil, and okay, cool. And so, but I would watch that video, I remember, and I was like, man, that makes sense, but it's such an extreme point of view. Because I've realized, man, have I been lied to, not just about Jesus and Christianity, but everything? Like, look at the music. He made a statement, well, if you turn off the music and you just listen to the lyrics, it's actually like very demonic and it's like bad. But just because there's beat and we accept it in our head, I was like, man, that's so true. That's so true. And I think he made some music in the past before he became a Muslim. And I was like, and he said, like, if people can't even comprehend this point, then they are so deep in like indoctrination with Spotify and all these things. And I would listen to a lot of rap music. And I was like, subhanAllah, that's true. Like, we are addicted to music. Everywhere I go, I put it on my in my ears and stuff. So I would be like, man, that was my first exposure to a Muslim. And then I think Kobe Bryant died, and I watched a couple of videos about death again. There was like a Muslim guy, I don't know his name, he had a big beard. It was the first guy I watched with a big beard in like Islamic clothes, and he said something like, death is coming to everybody, like Allah promises death. And I was like, yeah, like, I know. So what's the solution? Do you guys have anything? And then I would get into, I think, recommending some of the YouTube debates. So I would get into hijab. I think I watched a ton of hijab videos arguing in the park with atheists. And they would be really cool debates, like long debates, like 30, 40 minutes, and they would just be on one issue. And that was so crucial for me because I had to get these barriers from my head. Like, science can solve everything, all this. And hijab, but also other guys, they would just slowly start deconstructing, like, no, science cannot solve anything because it's predicated on logic and mathematics, which is not which is self-evident without science. There are things which are first principles which we adopt. For example, just the reality that this world exists. There's no way to scientifically prove this because science is in this world, but we all accept it to move forward. So I would just be exposed to that type of thinking, that Islamic philosophy, and I was like, man, this is like something new. This is finally some new way of thinking about the world, which is like very, very, not radical, but it goes straight to the heart. Like music haram. Why? Because and straight to the heart. Why women cover? And then as far as they would explain it, I was like, man, yeah, all day I'm looking at women. Like when I was, I'm a man, so obviously, but I would be like, I can't even look at a woman without thinking of having sex with her. And yeah, it's true. The hijab makes her protected against myself. And I know when I was drunk what I was doing with women, or what, and it wasn't always nice. And so I know what men can do. I know. And you don't even have to explain to me through rational arguments. So that made complete sense to me. And all these rules in Islam that seem so like weird in the beginning, then you look at it, yes, that is actually the truth. But nobody wants to admit it. Nobody wants to admit it. But anyway, so I would get to these debates, but more importantly, it was about Allah. Because I was still an atheist, so yeah, these are nice things, but what about Allah? What's this thing? And basically it took me a couple of months to go deep into the cosmological arguments because I couldn't follow them for a while. They were too complex for me, but sometimes it would make sense, like the infinite regress cannot happen. Yeah, that's true. And so the universe had to have a beginning which was not created, and it had to be eternal for it to even start. And so those things would make sense to me. And then I watched anti-arguments, and they would also make sense to me, but less. And then I would watch the response, and it goes back and forth. And at some point I said, well, there's no other explanation. Like the universe had to have a beginning, and this is the best explanation. Like at that moment, at the end, the atheist or whoever was like agnostic would just say, well, we just don't know. We can't say for sure. That was their explanation. Or they would say, maybe there's another way. Maybe there's like another way to explain this. Just we shouldn't jump to conclusions. You know, they would just go to that. And I was like, why are you guys going there if this is like the only option? There's no other option because everything else is contingent. It depends on something else to exist. There is an only option, is an independent, eternal cause behind everything. So why are you guys jumping out? And I realized, because now we're talking about something that has, responsibilities, or there's this like, when you realize God must be real, or God is probably real, there's this like heaviness with that. It's like, whoa, I've been living my life like a jahil for the past 30 years. What to do? How is that possible? Like, and since then, I basically became convinced that this God exists. But this was still like 4 years ago. So this was still very early. But I became a theist. I became someone who believes in this eternal force. I wasn't identifying with Islam at all, but it was sympathetic to me, and it was the only religion which was like making most sense to me. But I was like, it's still nuts. Like I still think it's too much. I still think these rules. What does it like? How does whatever? Some of the rules in Islam I couldn't make sense of it. Like why would God do that? Like why would God care about divorce law? And stuff like that. I wouldn't read the Quran. It was just sympathetic, but I realized I came to the conclusion that God is real because of Islamic guys on YouTube, And then, so this would go for a while, and my wife, was watching me from a distance, and she would like make jokes like, haha, you're a Muslim now. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna become Muslim. It was just like funny, but at the end, it was like, man, this really makes sense, but I'm definitely not becoming a Muslim. But let me create my own religion. So this was my next step. Since I knew like man-made religions exist and Islam is one of them, I said like I'm not gonna do any Islam. That's nuts. But I know God is real. I know it for sure. There's no other option. You would have to convince me through the argument. So I said, well, I want this connection. I want this connection with this thing. I know it exists. So I would pray, but I would pray in an Islamic way. I would put my head on the floor and I would beg God, like, hey, God, in my language, if you're real, please help me, guide me, help me see what's the truth. Just guide me to accept it in my heart, which is an Islamic prayer in a sense. But I would just do that, and I would pray like a couple of times a day. I would even pray at work. So I would be praying at the toilet. I didn't know it was haram, but I would be praying anywhere I could. Just like in an Islamic way. So I would be like, I would just bow down. I wouldn't recite anything. I would just bow down and I would just pray. Like make some long du'as in my language. And that's it. And this would take like a year, really. Like this would be like a year. But that allowed me to build a relationship with something higher. So I had this concept already. And then I would watch a lot of Mike Tyson videos and Khabib Nurmagomedov and how they are, Muslim, and how their concepts of death and life. I was like resonating with it so much. It would be really incredible what I would resonate with. And especially when I watched the Kebir documentary about his life in Dagestan, I was like, it's so beautiful what ties these guys together. And I was like, man, we were missing something here. So I would be looking at Islam from a high level point of view, like a societal perspective. And I would be saying like, hey, it's so beautiful to have this force above you to tell you what to do. To, you know, if you really believe in it, it really is a game changer for your life, because it's constantly watching you. You have this purpose in your life, and I wanted that purpose. I wanted it. I would be like, when I would look at a Muslim, I would be like envious. Like, he's got something. I don't have it. I don't know how to get it, because there's many people who left Christianity and they say, I would like to have a relationship with God, but I can't. Oh, I envy religious people. That's because there are so many irrational barriers in Christianity to accept it that you have to be delusional at some point to accept the crucifixion, the resurrection, all these doctrines, Trinity, like that. You have to go through so much trouble to accept this, and it will be a problem because in your brain you will have this cognitive dissonance. You will not be able to rationalize these things. So that's a ton of people in the West have this experience when they bounce off Christianity and they leave it, but they don't know, like in Islam there's no barrier. It's like easy to get to Allah. It's like there's just one God. Like, forget Trinity, forget all this crucifixion nonsense and original sin. Just, this is Allah, purpose of life, worship me. And this is such a natural way of doing it, you know. So anyways, subhanAllah, where was I? So I'm watching debates, I'm creating my own religion. And then, I had this moment of fitra awakening. So I had this moment of jogging. I would watch a lot of Islamic speakers. I would watch a lot of Islamic lectures at this point. So I would be hooked. I would be like, man, I really like this Islam thing now. I would be like first time exposed to like, what is Jannah? I remember watching that video by Mohammed Hoblos, what is Jannah? And I was blown away. Like, what? You're telling me this is paradise? And then when he would describe the Day of Judgment, I would resonate with it so much. Because they don't sugarcoat it. You know, he tells you what it is, you know, for sure. So I would be like, I like these concepts. I like the concept of Day of Judgment. I like the concept of paradise and hell. I like it. You need it for your life. But there's still like, why 4 wives? There's still so many unclear questions in Islam. But I had this, and I had the questionnaire about like what I want to ask some Muslims. I've never met any. I would just be making that. So, but I had this fitra moment when I was jogging. Just everything came together, everything. Once I learned basic Islam, like Day of Judgment, why pray, why Allah is worthy of worship, why is He one, incredible feeling would overcome me. And it basically just, the feeling was Islam is true. But I would ignore it. I mean, many reverts have this experience. I would ignore the feeling and I would just carry on. So another year went by. Guys, this is how it is. This is true. So another year went by. I would be again lost in the dunya, in this world. But Islam was definitely already like very high on my radar. I was just trying to avoid it. I didn't want Islam. But it was just something, it was like a magnet pulling me in. It was incredibly attractive. Everything was just pulling me in. And when I learned something, I wanted to learn more. And I would be like an engine. I would just be learning. I would just watch hours of content, read like hours and hours of content. Really, it was... And this is experience with many readers. They can't get enough of Islam because it's so new for us. We've never heard of it. And so for me, the biggest point was just learning about Islam, learning about Allah, reading the Quran, really, just to ground myself. I would recommend reading it before, accepting Islam, because how do you know what's written there, I would be highlighting certain parts I wouldn't understand, or they would be too controversial for me. So that would take some couple of months to also research. And the biggest issue for me was, like, Islam was very clear to me in terms of the main pillars, in terms of what happens when you die, in terms of what's the purpose of life, in terms of who is God, who is Allah. But the main issue for me was the kind of social aspect of Islam on the political level as a society. I saw the problems in the Middle East. I saw the problems in the war, and then I realized there's a bunch of Islamic sects and deviations and history that I'm not looking into, and I shouldn't even look into. Like I was doing it correctly, just studying the basics of Islam, and I came to conclusion there's no other way of life I can embrace, because this is the only thing based on the truth, and I will be lying to myself if I would go for atheism or anything else. So at the end of the day, it was the only logical choice for me. I didn't quite have a choice, because the only issues I had were kind of non-liberal policies of Islam, but that was just because of my liberal mindset. But I'm not a liberal now, so it changed, and it changed a lot. So like when I embraced Islam, I still thought some things which I don't think now, because Islam tells me not to think those things, and it's correct actually, because what I had thought before was just programming. I was whitewashed by my school, by liberalism and all that, as everybody is. So you have these barriers, and you have to be really unbiased to look at that. Now, to be honest, I wouldn't really study a lot the life of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I would look at some parts of it. I knew like the sirah, the basics, but I wasn't quite sure, and I wasn't very diving deep into hadiths. I don't think any revert is, because that's kind of the secondary source of your religion, let's put it this way. But yeah, I think maybe that's for another video, but later on, once I embraced Islam, those were kind of my next steps to study those Sahaba and all that. Because Islam in real life is beautiful, especially if you read about the Prophet's life and the caliphs and what happened in the first generations. It's amazing, just to hear those stories. And that kind of gives you even more conviction that you're on the right path. So overall, basically, yeah, I was still dabbling in haram things, but I already knew I'm kind of walking to the path of Islam, even though I tried to ignore it. But it was just everywhere. I just learned about it, even though if I didn't want to, it was just like so attractive. And by the end of the year, I think I was kind of drunk out, and I just said to myself, like, I am again running in circles. I gotta make a decision. I can't be undecided forever. And I know some people who have been deciding to accept Islam for 7 or 10 years. How insane is that? That's actually a definition of insanity, because you're kind of stuck in limbo. You're not getting any benefit for anything. So you either just forget about it or just move on, and I know it's difficult, but so I said to myself, that's why you have to be very grounded in the religion. So I said, is there any other option that God doesn't exist? No, there must be God. It was very firm. I had Quranic arguments, I had the arguments from design, I have the arguments from cosmology, I have philosophical arguments to back it up. It's very strong. This is never gonna change. So the second was, is there any other religion that talks about one God? No. They all talk about it, but they all take wrong turns in Trinity and all that nonsense. There's only one religion that talks about like oneness, and that's Tawheed, that's Islam. And then is there, so if I look at the scripture, because that was like a big step for me, like a scripture, what, somebody telling me something. If I look at it, does it make sense? And the Quran was like so mind-blowing, it was really amazing to see. And especially if you learn about how it was preserved, how it was compiled compared to the Bible, you're coming off the Christian kind of faith, you're not used to this level of authenticity. And I'm not even talking about the hadith scientists and the chain of narrations and all that. So that was a game changer as well, to just know, like, subhanallah, this Quran is preserved. It's the same words that have been written by at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and subhanallah. And so when I read it, it was different. And then you can look up the miracles, the scientific proofs, and all those, embryology, and they help. But essentially, my conviction was in Tawheed, and that's when you have that foundation. It's pretty simple, it's pretty easy, because I didn't convert because of like Islam makes sense because it's against LGBT. That's not a reason to convert to Islam. That's a weak reason, because against LGBT you can have a fascism as well. Like, that's stupid. You have to have some sort of foundation in your deen. And finally, around the New Year's Eve, I came to realization, 2020, I think, and it was like pandemic time, that I have to become a Muslim. And then it took me like 2 or 3 months. It was actually 2 months to go to the masjids and like practice Islam, learn Al-Fatiha before actually saying the Shahada. So I would be like on the trial period, like when you buy software, you have a trial period. That was my approach to Islam. I would like test it out to see if I can handle it. So I would pray. I would, do all these things. I would cut down alcohol and cigarettes at all. Like it would be completely out of my life. And it was amazing. I remember first time in the masjid, I would be just standing there in awe. Like there was no one there. It was like a bigger madrasa in Prague. Then I went to another masjid and learned to pray, learned Al-Fatiha, all that. And after a couple of months, I said, well, I've tested it as a trial, and now I'm diving deep. And I just pronounced the Shahada on my own, and then I did the Shahada with the guys outside. When I did the Shahada, it was just a regular day, and I just said like, hey, today I'm doing it. I took my scooter, went to the square to see some guys that I knew, and they just told me some basics. I already knew it, and I said like, yeah, I'm like ready. And then did the Shahada, and that's it. And I never looked back. Bought some halal meat on the way back, because I had the halal store next to my apartment in Prague. And I was so happy. I was like, finally, I actually affirmed this. And imagine this, accepting Islam is the biggest decision in your life, right? Because it will actually affect all your future. So it will affect how you're going to marry. It will affect how you raise kids. It will affect everything basically in your life. Your family relationships. But it's the only decision that I took like 2 years to accept. So I never made a decision like this before. When you go to school, to which school do you go to? I made a decision very fast. Or what career am I gonna take? It wasn't a decision like that. But this was the decision that I've made for 2 years. So it's the most important decision of my life, and it's the decision I don't regret, because I have made so much research on it that subhanallah, I stand by anything Islam says, and I'm very happy about it. Since then I never looked back really. So if you're struggling with whether you should accept Islam or not, just bro, I'm telling you, it's incredible feeling and incredible truth, because you'll finally be connected to God. Like there's no other way you get connected to God. I realized this, because if you come up with your own thing, it's not gonna be there, because you don't know the mechanism, you don't know what God wants from you, you don't know nothing. If you're convinced God exists, if you're not convinced God exists, listen to my arguments or watch that, because those will be really like crucial, because there's no other option. Then and if you want to follow some of the religions, then I mean, how does Hinduism make sense if God is one? How does like Judaism make sense if you can have an argument with God and you can win? What? How can Christianity make sense if there are 3 gods in one, all, and they're part of one, but they are all co-eternal, co-equal? What is this? You come to conclusion that every religion on this planet has some piece of the puzzle, as Angel says, but only Islam has a full picture, because the only religion in this world that is about worshipping God is Islam. I'm sorry to say this, but it's true. All the other religions have some innovations, some polytheism, some man-made things all written all over them, which make them, corrupted, even though they might have the original message somehow. So that's why I chose Islam. And then once you read the Quran, it basically just affirms that. So I can't see someone who doesn't accept it, besides they have something in their heart, like some ego. Maybe they have a culture that doesn't fit with Islam like mine, or maybe they don't want to accept it for some other reason. But essentially truth stands like this, and then you have to just go there. And I would just say one more thing, that if you're thinking about converting to Islam, what it will give you, it's a structure for life. So everything will be kind of in a structure. Your entire day is prayer to prayer to prayer to prayer. You're always thinking about the next prayer, where you're gonna do it, especially in Ramadan, like today. You're thinking about breaking your fast. Where do you work out? You have a structure how to deal with your wife, how to deal with your money, or how to give charity, what to eat, where to get meat, how to raise children, how to be a good person, how to give charity. All this is in Islam. So it gives you a coherent structure. What happens when someone dies? It tells you that you know how to deal with it. What happens if somebody does something else? You know what to do. If you sin, you know how to get back on the straight path, inshallah. So it's basically like a GPS. Think of it as a GPS in your car, and it points to Allah all the time. And all you have to do, all your job is, it's so simple. Just get on the Sirat al-Mustaqim, the straight path. So get on that path of GPS. So wherever it points, just go there. And that's all you have to do. That's why Islam is simple. You don't have to be highly intelligent to get it, or you can be like a simple farmer. It can work for everyone because it's just about getting closer to Allah. So GPS points there. GPS points to Jannah, the paradise. And the road is clear. You can go. But you have to go, and you have roadblocks. You have your culture. You might have problems with some Islamic things, like how do I get this done? How do I stop drinking? It's all a work in progress. You have years to go by, but imagine Shahada is key to paradise. So if you die knowing about this, it's not good. Like the majority of scholars say you won't be accepted to paradise because you knew it's the truth, but you refused it because of culture. Like myself, I know, because I was in these shoes. I refused Islam because I didn't like it, but I knew it's true already, like a year before it. So if you have that feeling already, man, it's not gonna go away. This feeling is gonna stay with you. So you just have to get to a place where you finally accept it in your heart. Testify it with your tongue, make a shahada, man, and then you have the keys to Jannah. And of course, you gotta die on deen. You have to die like a Muslim. But it's easier once you have done the shahada. All right. One more thing, I can't imagine I've lived 28 years of my life without any knowledge of Islam. I think it's a disgrace of this modern system that it doesn't teach the biggest thing in the world. It's more important than the mathematics. It's more important than economy. It's more important than weather forecast. It's because it's about your life and death. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. So I'm very happy I've discovered this purpose of life. It's an incredible feeling because we live in this hyper skeptical society. So when you finally find something which is solid, you're like, man, where was this all my life? Why haven't I seen it? And it's just, the feeling you get is like, finally I belong somewhere. Finally I'm home. Finally I found something that's real. All right guys, so assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Leave me a comment below, and yeah, let's catch up in the next video. Hopefully, if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them. So thank you so much. See you in the next video, inshallah.